Welcome to Nature Immersion. Kyle here with my Save the Gulf shirt, Gulf of Mexico. I'd like to discuss a little bit further the concept of what is native and what is not when it comes to plants. And I'm going to read a passage from Bringing Nature Home, How You Can Sustain Wildlife with Native Plants by Douglas Tallamy. I'm going to do this reading because the author and I kind of share the same history with what we thought was a native plant and what wasn't, and how we came to change our opinion on what is native and what's not. And because he puts it so well, I would just like to use his words. A little bit of info on Douglas Tallamy. I'm going to read about the author from his book here. Douglas Tallamy is professor and chair of the Department of Entomology and Wildlife Ecology at the University of Delaware in Newark, Delaware, where he has published 68 research articles and has taught insect taxonomy, behavioral ecology, and other courses for nearly 3 decades. Chief among his research goals is to better understand the many ways insects interact with plants and how such interactions determine the diversity of animal communities. The Garden Writers Association of America awarded Bringing Nature Home its silver medal in 2008. Well, I'd like to read what got the gold. So here we go. Douglas Tallamy's Bringing Nature Home, What is Native and What is Not. Okay, so now the plane is passed. When I first became interested in the impact of alien plants on our nation's biodiversity, I was surprised to learn that the terms native and alien were controversial. Somewhat naively, I thought that when a plant found in China is sold in the United States as an ornamental, it can be classified as an alien without much debate. I was wrong. Recently, a good friend insisted that if a plant has been in North America long enough, it can be considered a native, regardless of its evolutionary origins. Even more problematic is achieving consensus on the definition of a native plant. The broadest definition is also the most commonly employed. A native is any plant that historically grew in North America. Some people recognize that it's a stretch to call a plant adapted to a California desert a native of New Jersey, but these same people happily consider all plants that grow east of the Mississippi as native to any area in the east. Maps of U.S. hardiness zones are often brought out to justify the nativeness of one species or another. By this reasoning, a plant adapted to Zone 6 in Tennessee will serve as a fine native in the areas of Pennsylvania with a Zone 6 climate. Let nature define nativity. The problem with these definitions of alien and native is that they do not consider the roles plants play within their respective ecosystems. I believe that what is and is not a native plant is best defined by nature herself. Because plants do not grow in isolation from the other living things around them and are in fact essential to the lives of neighboring creatures, they interact with the residents of their habitats in countless ways. Over immense periods of time, these interactions help shape both the plants and the animals in a particular place. That is, the plants and animals in an area co-evolve, each group continually influencing the evolution of the other. When a plant is transported to an area of the world that contains plants, animals, and diseases with which it has never before interacted, the co-evolutionary constraints that kept it in check at home are gone, as are the ecological links that made that plant a contributing member to its ecosystem. In an ecological and evolutionary sense, the alien plant's new neighbors won't know what to make of it and, in most cases, will exclude it from their biological interactions. The plant will occupy space and use resources, light, water, and soil nutrients, that would otherwise have been available for a native plant, but it will not pass the energy it harnesses from the sun up the food chain. If alien species were providing as many ecosystem services in their new homes as they did where they evolved, they would support about the same number of insect species in both areas. But as we have seen, this is hardly the case. This is why I argue that a plant can only function as a true native while it is interacting with the community that historically helped shape it. When native and alien are defined in terms of the presence or absence of historical evolutionary relationships, the confusion over these concepts disappears. The Norway maple, for example, evolved in northern Europe. When John Bartram introduced the tree to the Morris Arboretum of Philadelphia in 1756, this species had never before interacted with the plants, animals, and pathogens of North America. Well into its third century of residence, the growth and reproduction of Norway maples is still influenced little or not at all by organisms native to this country. Nor have its centuries here been long enough for North American plants and animals to adapt to the presence of Norway maple. Why has its residence made so little difference in shaping Norway maple to the needs of the plants and animals that evolved in North America? Quite simply, a history measured in centuries is the tiniest drop in the proverbial bucket of evolutionary time. The lineage that gave rise to Norway maples in Europe has been separated from the lineage that gave rise to North American maples ever since the North American continent separated from Eurasia over 80 million years ago. During that immense span of time, Norway maples diverged genetically from North American maples in countless ways, including leaf chemistry, the timing of flower and seed set, growth rate, shade tolerance, and so on. 200 or 300 years is only the smallest fraction of the 80 million years Norway maple has been changing from its North American relatives. We can hardly expect Norway maple to fit productively into North American ecosystems after spending only a minuscule amount of its evolutionary history on this continent. If we can agree that native and alien are not arbitrary terms open to debate, but instead are unambiguously defined by a plant's evolutionary background, it is clear that Norway maples and any other plant from Europe or China can only be considered as aliens. But what about plants from North America? Blue spruce and Douglas firs are good examples to consider. Blue spruce and one genotype of Douglas fir spent much of their evolutionary history in the Rocky Mountains. The other genotype of Douglas fir is found in the Pacific Northwest. When a resident of Portland, Oregon plants a Douglas fir, the tree will grow within the community that historically helped to create it. But if we plant a Douglas fir in Oxford, Pennsylvania, the tree is thousands of miles from the community of organisms that were part of its evolutionary history. It will grow just fine in Oxford, but it will not function as a native to that area, regardless of any attempts to label it as such. A similar story can be told for blue spruce. We hear time and again from well-meaning homeowners and nurserymen that it is a wonderful native, albeit a little too blue for some garden designs. Indeed, it is a wonderful native in western Colorado, but in the suburbs of the east it is as divorced from the historical ecosystem as China's tree of heaven. So now you have Douglas Tallamy's definition of what is native and what is not native. And personally, I will agree with his definition of